For those of you who don't know, Nintendo made a top-secret console in between the Wii and Switch that very few people were aware of and skeptics still doubt exists. And if you're one of the very few people out there who actually owned one of these things, then you probably weren't too entertained with the Switch in 2018, seeing as how many of the key games were just ported over from the last generation. But even though I agree that the Switch's second year should have had more original games, I think every notable Wii U game should be brought over to the Switch since it's easy for developers to do, most people haven't played them anyway, and we're not being forced to buy them. However, while I'm sure most good Wii U games will get Switch ports, there's 8 games in particular that I just don't see this happening for unless Nintendo gets desperate in the distant future. And I'm not talking about random-ass games like Devil's Third or Sonic Boom that obviously aren't gonna get ports. Although Hello Kitty Cruiser's got one, so I suppose anything's possible. What 8 notable Wii U games probably won't come to the Switch, though? Well, crank your dialysis machines up to the max, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, the 400-foot-tall Cameron, to tell you 8 Wii U games that probably won't come to the Nintendo Switch. Number 1. Paper Mario Color Splash. Even though the sticker system was admittedly not as good as the first 2 games' more traditional RPG elements, Paper Mario Color Splash was a jolly good time for most people who were willing to accept the game for what it was. But even though it's a great game with a lot to offer, and it'd be easy to port it over despite the slight gamepad mechanics it had on the Wii U, far too many fans are just way too stubborn to even consider giving it a chance out of sheer protest until we get a classic Paper Mario game, which I'm sure we'll get at some point since we've definitely not seen the last of the Paper Mario series, and Nintendo knows that making a sequel that's not similar to the Thousand Year Door will get the same kind of backlash as Color Splash did, no matter how good the game actually is. So despite the fact that Color Splash sold an ass hair better than Bayonetta 2, which ended up getting ported over, I don't think a lot of fans will be ready to give it an honest look until their demands of a new Thousand Year Door-like game are met and the Color Splash curse is lifted. Number 2. Star Fox Zero. Even though I'm admittedly not a diehard Star Fox fan, the Star Fox game we got on the Wii was a game that had a lot of promise and could have really been fun, but due entirely to the forced gyro controls being touted as innovation, the game just wasn't very fun. And the worst thing about it was that in my opinion, this one bad feature being enough to bury a game that would have otherwise been great is more frustrating than if we had just gotten a flat out bad game, because it'd be like wanting to go to Six Flags and experience Superman the Ride with a 221-foot drop that you can't find anywhere else in the world, only for your stepdad to take you there and not let you ride anything other than the Terry wheel. Nintendo could have just as easily let us turn the gyro controls off completely and have fun, but instead of admitting that the Wii U gamepad was pointless, Nintendo figured that the problem was that none of the games so far had really tried to utilize it and were determined to convince people that there was a reason behind the gamepad after all. And even though the gamepad does make very specific kinds of games a little better, something like Star Fox is just better off having traditional controls, at least as an option. With that being the case though, doesn't it make sense to just take the forced gyro controls away and port the game over? Well, if you ask my malnourished ass, all hope for Star Fox Zero picking up steam's long gone, because even though not that many people have actually played it, the game's reputation's too tainted to the point where Nintendo might as well just make a new Star Fox game altogether. And if Star Fox Zero's not coming to the Switch, then you could bet your uncle that Star Fox Guard's not coming either, especially since it actually needs the Wii U's gamepad. But since that's a bonus game, then just consider it a bonus entry to this list. Number 3. Kirby and the Rainbow Curse. It should be pretty obvious as to why this won't come to the Switch, but even though the tablet does have touch controls, it's not very likely that Nintendo would release a Switch game that couldn't be played on the TV, because that'd just confuse and disappoint a lot of people no matter how big the warning label on the box is. I mean, when the rhythm game Voez tried being a tablet exclusive, nobody really cared, but even that eventually got a patch to where you had the option to use buttons if you for some reason wanted to. And I suppose Canvas Curse could have analog or Joy-Con controls added, but all that work just to make the game less fun wouldn't really be worth it since the game wasn't really that popular to begin with. Number 4. Yoshi's Woolly World. This game's criminally underrated. No, seriously, if you don't like this game, then you're going to jail if I find you and have a fake police uniform handy. Because most of the people that don't like this game are just playing it wrong and aren't even trying to 100% it, which is what the developers had in mind when designing the stages. But even though the game sold pretty well on the Wii U, we already had a port of this on the 3DS, which didn't stop Hyrule Warriors and Treasure Tracker from coming to the Switch. But given the fact that Yoshi's Crafted World's gonna try to be relevant for the foreseeable future, Woolly World's gonna have to sit its ass down so people don't get confused over which game's the newer of the two. Number 5. Wonderful 101. This game was pretty good and will probably be a cult classic someday if it isn't already, but I'd imagine there'd be a decent amount of work to taking away the Wii U's gamepad mechanics. And even though it's certainly possible to do, it's probably not worth it given how poorly the game sold. And I know that could partially be contributed to the fact that nobody knew what a Wii U was, but people who did own Nintendo's top secret console knew damn well what Wonderful 101 was. They just didn't buy it themselves. Whenever I mentioned the game to the other 4 people in the world who had a Wii U besides me, they just said, "Oh yeah, that game looks really cool. I'm probably gonna buy it. At some point. Maybe." It's a shame this game didn't do better, but even though I really liked it, I don't think it's for everybody, and releasing it on the Switch would still be too risky when Platinum could just focus on other games instead, given the fact that porting this would take some actual effort as opposed to being copy and pastable like other games. Number 6. Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD. I want these friggin' games so bad, but for some reason, Nintendo's just being weird about GameCube games on the Switch. I always say, porting Wii U games to the Switch can't take more than 5 minutes if there aren't a lot of gamepad mechanics. But seeing as how these were originally GameCube games that were already given the HD treatment, porting these over to the Switch would probably only take Nintendo about 30 seconds or so and make them millions of dollars. Yet N-Dog still won't do it. Nor will they give us the Luigi's Mansion remake either, despite the fact that it's going to be on the 3DS. My guess is that N-Dog's paranoid that if they ported Luigi's Mansion over to the Switch as well, that people would just confuse it with the third game, just like more casual people might confuse Wind Waker and Twilight Princess for Breath of the Wild. And I know Bayonetta 2's in stores despite Bayonetta 3 being a thing, but I suppose the thinking's that it's much harder to confuse numbered sequels. I know it's silly for me to even want these games for a third and fourth time, but the main reason I want these so badly is because I'm sure it'd be easier for Nintendo to port them over than it would be to coerce my dad to forage for rings and coins. Whether it be holding off on GameCube games for the Switch, or not wanting to confuse casuals. I'd be surprised if these games came over to the Switch anytime soon, if ever at all. Number 7. Nintendo Land. I know I said that obvious games wouldn't make the list, so most of you are probably wanting Captain Obvious to whoop my candy ass right now, because Nintendo Land was entirely built around having the Wii U gamepad act as a second screen, whereas the Switch is a one-screen experience. So yeah, I guess it's kind of obvious that this game won't get a Switch port, but Super Mario Party also has mini-games that require 2 screens, you dingus. You need 2 cartridges to play those mini-games, but you can do it. So it is theoretically possible to bring Nintendo Land over to the Switch, but even though I'm literally the only person in the entire world who actually liked Nintendo Land, it really is obvious why they wouldn't port it over since nobody cared about it in the first place. So why am I even bringing it up? Well, because like I said, I actually enjoyed Nintendo Land, and I think it has a lot of potential now that Nintendo has a console that people actually care about. Just do something fun with the Joy-Cons and give us competent online play, and we're in business. So yeah, I guess I don't really have a good reason to include Nintendo Land on this list since it's pretty obvious that it's not coming over. But frigate, Star Fox Guard made the list as a bonus game, and Twilight Princess and Wind Waker are 2 games, you know. So don't sue me for false advertising, I gave you more than you demanded. To make things right though, I won't include Game & Wario, because I don't think anybody gave a shit about that. Number 8. Super Mario Maker. Most people probably want to shove a taco up my butt for suggesting this game won't come to the Switch, but I really don't think it will, not as an out-in-the-open port anyway. I do, however, think that a Super Mario Maker port might come over disguised as a sequel with 1 or 2 features added like Splatoon 2 was. And don't get me wrong, Splatoon 2's had enough added to it at this point via DLC to where it's pretty much a completely different game now, which is fine by me seeing as how that game pretty much needs the internet to be fun anyway, but it doesn't make much sense for Mario Maker to come over as a port when it wouldn't take much to get away with calling it a sequel. I'm not saying that's gonna happen because with all the time that's passed since the last game, it's far more likely that Mario Maker's getting a lot added to it to be deserving of being called a successor. But my point is that at the very least, Nintendo won't straight up call it a port when they wouldn't even have to add that much to call it a sequel, which I wouldn't even have a problem with since the game was great the way it was even on the Wii U. But if calling the game a sequel would make it much more appealing and it wouldn't take much to get away with it, then there's no way Nintendo would call it a port even if that's what it was. What do you think though? Are there any notable ports you don't think we'll get? Are there any you don't want? Are you watching this video in the future and I'm dead ass wrong about something? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'll pin whatever I find most entertaining. Don't forget to like and share this video to help this channel grow. Press the subscribe button if you too are a 400-foot tall badass. And if you want to support this channel even further, then check our Patreon out to see if any of the rewards appeal to you. My name's Cameron, and I'll see you next time.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.